our number 10 spot, we have royal fish. This is one law that came into existence because someone was feeling a little greedy. Since 1327, it has been decreed that all beached whales in the UK belong to the king or queen, and we can all thank Edward II for this one. In 1324, he passed a law defining whales, sturgeons, dolphins, and porpoises caught within 5 kilometers of the shore as royal fish. These fish collected a lot of money in medieval markets, and those who were wealthy wanted these fish for their special feasts and banquets. Of course, instead of purchasing them with your riches, what do? Well, you just make up an insane law so that you can steal them, of course. What's even crazier is that this law actually hasn't been repealed, and in 2004 there was a fisherman who caught a 10-foot sturgeon near Wales, and he actually had to ask Queen Elizabeth's permission to sell it. Apparently she told him that he could use the catch, quote, as he saw fit.
Well, at number 9, you could be breaking the law. According to official US code, you are not allowed to wear the flag or use it as bedding and curtains, as it's disrespectful. Maybe that's a little bit outdated, but a lot of you guys probably haven't broken that law of using an actual flag like that. Well, it does go on to say that you also can't use it for advertising or putting it on cushions or handkerchiefs or napkins or anything at all that will be thrown away afterwards. Now, although police aren't likely to arrest you these days for wiping away birthday cake with an American themed napkin, you're still technically breaking the law. Alright, at number 8 now, we have jaywalking. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with this word, jaywalking is basically crossing the road when and where you probably shouldn't, and it's illegal in almost all US states. Now, a lot of people out there seem to think that jaywalking is more of a guideline, and that if you cross the road in a place where you shouldn't, you might just get a few angry beeps from cars that are passing by. But the truth is, you're probably breaking the law. Your punishment or fine will vary from place to place, but it's best to just always cross at a safe place, just in case. Alright, moving on to number 7 now. It's having a permanent marker pen in public. Yeah, now most of you guys will own one of these things, a permanent marker, or you might call it a Sharpie, but in some places out there, if you have one of these in public and you're under the age of 18, you could be breaking the law. Now, it all comes from anti-graffiti laws that are aimed to tackle young people vandalizing public property with aerosol sprays, but because it sometimes happens with marker pens too, they just threw those into the law as well. You actually have to be accompanied by a legal guardian in some places if you have a marker pen. It's a very weird law, and there have only been a few cases of it actually being enforced, but the law is the law. No marker pens for teenagers in public. Next up at number 6, we've got insulting royalty. Now, this might sound like a law from medieval times, but in many European countries, if you're caught insulting the head of a state, you could find yourself in prison. It all comes under an old law called lèse majesté that has become more relaxed over the years, but there's still examples of it being enforced. In 2005, a journalist in Poland was sentenced for insulting the Pope, and then a human rights activist was charged with insulting Vladimir Putin. But it's nothing, absolutely nothing compared to Thailand, who have actually charged 53 people under the lèse majesté since 2014. 40 of those were from online comments that people wrote. In fact, one man got 60 years in prison for making comments about the Thai royal family. In this day and age, many of us just make casual jokes about kings and queens, but just be careful who is listening or who is reading them online, because it might just land you in jail. I was going to make a joke at the end of this one, but I don't want to go to prison. Coming in at number 5 now, we have swearing on the phone. Now, in a number of US states, there is a law that says over the telephone it is illegal to use any kind of obscene, vulgar, profane, or indecent language to another person that you're talking to. In the US state of Virginia, this law was actually put into practice in 2014 when a man rang the office of an attorney general that he wasn't happy with. He reached the answer phone and proceeded to leave a whole message full of curse words and swearing, which actually landed him a $250 fine after pleading guilty to the misdemeanor. Now, we all get mad at people over the phone and sometimes swear at them, but depending on where you are, it might be best to watch your tongue if you don't want a nasty run-in with the law. Alright, moving on to number 4 now. We've got writing something disturbing. Just that. Now in some US states, if you write a horrific, violent or just plain creepy story, you could find yourself breaking the law. Some places class this kind of writing as disorderly conduct. In Illinois, for example, if you write something that disturbs the person who's reading it, whether or not you actually published it, the maximum penalty is 30 days in jail and a whopping $1,500 fine. That means if I grew up there as a teenager, most of the stuff that I wrote would probably have got me a month in a cell. I wrote some pretty lame, teenage, angsty rubbish. Alright, coming in at number 3 now. We have betting with friends. Most of us make small bets with our friends on the outcomes of, sporting events. $10 here, $20 there, and some people might even wager thousands on these bets. Now you guys might think that's just being irresponsible, it's not too bad, but it's technically illegal in some places. In Virginia, if you or your friends bet more than $2,000 in one day, you're classed as running an illegal gambling operation. In fact, in 2006, one man was even shot and killed by a SWAT team for doing this after betting over $2,000 on a football game. They later had to pay the victim's family $2 million because that was obviously ridiculous, but it's still a scary thought that one minute you can be considered a bit of a money risk taker looking for a thrill, no harm, it's all, just a bit of fun, and the next, you're basically Al Capone. Okay, moving on to number 2 now. We've got snowball fights. Yes, this law comes from Aspen in Colorado, with a law that states it is unlawful to throw stones or objects or fire guns in public or at a person in public. That seems fair, right? Yeah. But they also added snowballs. You are actually breaking the law if you throw a big fat snowball at your friend in the park. It seems like this law was brought in to stop people from actually throwing solid ice at another person and then being like, oh no, it was just a snowball. But the truth is, it's pretty hard to define where a snowball ends and a big lump of ice begins. If a police officer in Aspen thinks your snowball has crossed that line, they can slap you with a fine. Now I hope this law doesn't apply in other places out there, because snowball fights are probably the only good thing about winter. Am I right? Don't take that away from us. Finally, at number 1, we have a law that some of you guys might be breaking right now as you watch this: the Google account age. If you have a YouTube account, then you will have had to agree to their terms and conditions that you are at least 13 years old. Great, if you are 13 or older, then that's fine. But if you're not and you have an account that you can comment on this video with, you're technically breaking the law. In the US, companies like YouTube and Facebook have to obey the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which means no children under the age of 13 are allowed to sign up for websites that require personal information, just like this one. So if you're under 13, then well, I guess you can stay. I won't tell anyone, but you have to subscribe. I mean, if you want, obviously. It's completely optional, not bribing or threatening you. Or am I? No, I'm honestly not. Don't worry.
Coming in at number 10, we have gay marriage in Australia. Recently, Australians voted in a survey on the topic of same-sex marriage. Statistics in the survey showed that 61% of the Australian public voted that they were pro-legalizing marriage for homosexual couples. The turnout was said to be 79.5% of the population. While this survey is not legally binding, it is expected now that the government will move to put this into the law. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull said they voted yes for fairness, they voted yes for commitment, they voted yes for love, and now it is up to us here in the Parliament of Australia to get on with it. And hopefully get on with it they shall. Legislature should be in place in 2018.
In our number 9 spot today, we have strange cows. This law is one that was repealed in 1974 because at one point, I'm sure this made a lot of sense, but surely by 1974 and especially by now, it is simply just hilarious. This law is from Texas, and it stated that whoever, without the consent of the owner, shall take up, use, or milk any cow not his own, faced a $10 fine. How weirdly specific. There was a law and a specific amount of a fine set up just for milking a stranger's cow. I mean, I feel like I understand why this one is illegal, because how strange is it to just milk someone else's cow? A little intrusive if you ask me, to be honest. Of course, the only reason you'd be milking someone else's cow would be to steal the milk, and that is still rude to do now, but back in the day that could have had much heavier implications. Although that specific law was repealed, there is still a law in Texas that is in regards to the same sort of thing. It is still illegal to milk someone else's cow without permission, but now you'll be charged with theft and trespassing instead of a flat $10 rate. Also, who wants to be the weirdo stealing milk straight from a cow? In our number 8 spot today, we have cold feet. Okay, apparently since 19th century France, it's been legal to marry a dead person. Yeah, had to cut right to the chase with this one because beating around the bush simply just didn't seem right. Also known as necromancy, this law dates back to times when being born out of wedlock was a big no-no. So, say if your husband was to be out at war while you were pregnant and he ended up passing away in the war, this law would help to ensure that your child was born from within a marriage. The consent of the person who passed away could either be given by their family or if there was an existing engagement before they passed. This law still does actually exist in a way, with the most current form coming in 1959 after a terrible incident where a dam burst and 423 people lost their lives. One of the most recent examples of this was in 2017 when someone's partner was killed in a terror attack and he was still able to marry his partner posthumously. While this law sounded a little weird in the beginning, I am glad to know that it had some practical and important uses. In our number 7 spot today, we have no fun. Since 1966 in Victoria, Australia, it has been illegal to fly a kite in a public space if it bothers someone else. You actually can't even play a game in a public space if it's gonna annoy someone else. I really hope you don't have a Karen in the neighborhood, I guess, or no jump rope for you. This was listed as a part of the Summary Offences Act, but it's crazy that this is something that came into effect as recently as 1966 and not hundreds of years ago. It just seems like such a random rule to instate. And it was way more popular to see these kinds of no fun laws in legislation from centuries ago. Or footloose, I guess. Anyways, all of this aside, I don't think that there are many Aussies who will be upset if you choose to fly a kite on a nice breezy day. In our number 6 spot today, we have no UFO parking. After a man in this French winemaking town reported seeing aliens leave in a cigar-shaped UFO, the town of Châteauneuf-de-Pape made this law as follows. Article 1. The overflight, the landing, and the takeoff of aircraft known as flying saucers or flying cigars, whatever their nationality is, are prohibited on the territory of the community. Article 2. Any aircraft known as flying saucer or flying cigar which should land on the territory of the community will be immediately held in custody. Article 3. The forest officer and the city policeman are in charge, each one in what relates to him, of the execution of this decree. Not only is this law hilarious, but it's also super effective because they haven't seen any aliens or UFOs since it was passed in 1954. I really do respect them for doing what they can to protect their vineyards, however, but maybe the aliens just want a little wine too. In our number 5 spot today, we have no gum. You know when some people choose to do something wrong and then it ruins things for everyone who wasn't doing the wrong thing? Yeah, that's what happened in Singapore, and now no one can chew gum. There were some people who decided to try and mess with the mass rapid transit system, and they used chewing gum to do it. These people ended up costing the Housing and Development Board $150,000 a year just to clean up this gum, so in 1992, they banned it. They banned all gum substances, and so anyone importing, selling, or making gum can potentially face fines or even jail time. In 2004, however, there was an exception made for those who needed gum for therapeutic, dental, or nicotine chewing gum reasons, and those can be bought from a doctor or pharmacist. I wonder if there's an underground gum ring in Singapore now. In our number 4 spot today, we have no high heels. This law is a strange one, but it will be no problem for the overpacker in your life. If you're taking a trip to Greece anytime soon, make sure you don't pack only high heels, because if you do, then you won't be able to visit the Acropolis. That's right, in 2009 the country banned wearing high heels there. I really don't know why anyone would want to walk around there in high heels. I mean, ruins and dirt don't exactly make me scream stilettos, but clearly it was happening enough that a rule needed to be made. This rule, although seemingly random, is actually important. As it turns out, people's sharp shoes may have been damaging the site, and truly that's just not worth it. The ruins are 2,500 years old, so at this point I feel like we can throw on a pair of Vans and call it a day. No one needs to wear black tie attire when visiting a historical site. Like, sorry I forgot my ball gown, can I still visit Göbekli Tepe? That was a dumb joke. In our number 3 spot today, we have Jellicle cats. In 1939, in what was called, quote, a war measure to alleviate mental strain upon the populace, the town of French Lick Springs, Indiana passed a law that required all black cats to wear bells on Friday the 13th. This would make sure that anyone who heard a cat's bell was able to avoid crossing their path and having bad luck. I honestly feel like I should be making this up, but it's true. I guess I can really appreciate them doing what they can to alleviate the stressors in the lives of those who are having to live through a world war, but it just seems like there's so many other way more stressful parts of a war than black cats on one specific day. Like, imagine if we were entering World War III and we were like, nuclear bunkers? And the government was like, no, but you don't have to worry about black cats anymore. In our number 2 spot today we have Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh Bear is a well-known and loved animated figure, but he doesn't wear pants, and apparently a pantsless bear is upsetting to some people. Because of this weird issue, there's apparently a law in Poland that has banned Winnie the Pooh from playgrounds and schools. I mean, wait till they hear about all the pantsless and shirtless bears that are just walking around outside. I'm not sure how they'll be able to keep it together. I'm not exactly sure how far this one can be taken. I mean, if your kid has a Winnie the Pooh sticker, are they gonna be sent to jail? Probably not. I mean, even a fine seems a little ridiculous though, right? I don't know. I guess there's a reason I don't make laws. Winnie the Pooh is just a little too risque these days, I guess. In our number 1 spot today we have Footloose. Since we mentioned it all the way back at number 7, let's talk about a very real sort of Footloose situation. This law was instituted in Japan and was enacted in 1948 while US soldiers were occupying. Basically, the idea behind it was to stop Americans from corrupting the citizens of Japan, and basically dancing in a club after midnight was banned. It is said that dance halls often used to be fronts for other businesses during this time when the nation was poverty stricken. The activity was considered just too sinful, but now, since Japan is one of the largest economies in the world with a high standard of living and a vibrant nightlife, the ban was finally lifted in 2015. There is still a rule around post-midnight dancing though, it's just slightly more relaxed. You can dance, but once the clock strikes midnight, you need to be doing it in a well-lit room. I'm not sure what that changes, but what I do know is that when the lights come on after last call, it's time to go.
Now with our number 10, which is Wi-Fi squatting. Have you guys ever been standing outside of a coffee place and connected to their Wi-Fi for just a few minutes? Or maybe you've been inside of that place and connected maybe while your friend is buying a drink but you didn't buy anything yourself, and you might think you're just being a little bit cheeky, but you could actually be prosecuted for that if you get caught. Don't believe me? Well, there was one case of a man in Michigan back in 2007 who did exactly this in a parked car outside of a cafe. He was actually fined $400 and sentenced to 40 hours of community service, and he got off lightly. The maximum penalty under this law is actually $10,000 and 5 years in prison. I think that's a little bit mental. Moving on now, you probably all recognize this flag. Now, do you guys have any object in your house with it on?
Coming in at number 9, there will be 11 mandatory vaccinations in France. Vaccines are estimated to save more than 10 million lives, and recently a lot of Europe has been dealing with an outbreak of measles. The reason for the outbreak is that a lot of parents seem to think that vaccinating their child is optional and they decide not to do it. France is now moving to make 11 different vaccines mandatory. The Prime Minister Eduardo Philippe called the rise in preventable illness unacceptable. Coming in at number 8, there are new data protection laws coming into Europe. Nothing is sexier than data protection, am I right? No, of course not, but let's just try and get through it. So the new General Data Protection Regulation is enforceable from the 25th of May 2018. The new law aims to give people in Europe better protection of their personal data, for example their IP addresses and internet browse history. It also allows people access to information on how exactly their data is being used. Coming in at number 7, from 2018, there may no longer be any child support in the USA. In November 2017, news headlines told us that Trump and Congress had voted to end child support in the United States. But guys, be careful, this was actually a viral internet hoax. A site called React365 allows people to post prank news to trick people. This is exactly what happened, and then some foolish smaller news outlets took this as gospel and wrote articles on it. Classic fake news in action. When it comes to a news source, guys, you need to check it once, then check it twice. Oh, yeah, always quoting Taylor Swift by accident. Good. Coming in at number 6, there is a new holiday in the USA. On March the 28th, 2017, President Donald J. Trump signed the Vietnam War Veterans Recognition Act of 2017. This act officially recognizes March the 29th to be recognized as Vietnam War Veterans Day annually. While March the 29th, 2017 was officially the first Veterans Day, there is likely to be 2018 celebration to mark the first anniversary. The Vietnam War Veterans Recognition Act also encourages Americans to display their USA flag proudly every year on March the 29th. Coming in at number 5, we have changes to South African smoking laws. While nothing is set in stone, it looks as if 2018 could be a landmark year for change in regards to smoking in South Africa. Business Tech reported that Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi said that the Tobacco Products Control Amendment Act would be submitted to Cabinet for approval early next year. The act would look to impose a zero-tolerance ban on indoor smoking in public places. It would also introduce stricter controls on outdoor smoking near public buildings. Again, it would also adjust laws on how cigarettes are sold and displayed. Coming in at number 4, the UK is banning sexist commercials. No more women in the kitchen while the man's out back fixing the car. No more tits and teeth to sell toothbrushes. Absolutely none of it, and actually I guess it kind of makes sense. In the UK, advertising laws are changing and there will now be a ban on gender stereotypes and sexist advertisements. Advertisements will not be allowed to mock people for not conforming to gender stereotypes either. For example, it would not be okay for an ad to mock a male for crying because it isn't considered manly. If brands don't conform, the Advertising Standards Agency can fine them. Coming in at number 3, minimum wage entitlements are going up. In the USA, several states are raising their minimum wage in 2018. California looks set to become the first state with a $15 minimum wage, and New York City will also raise its minimum to $15. In Hawaii, minimum wage will go up to $10.10. Maine will get a $10 minimum wage, and Michigan goes up to $9.25. Vermont up to $10.10. Things are still looking pretty low in Minnesota though. In Canada, minimum wage will increase to $14 in Ontario and $15 in Alberta. In the United Kingdom, the national minimum wage will increase to £8.05. It is likely minimum wages will increase in most countries in line with inflation. Holla at you number 2, weed is about to be legalized in Canada. Marijuana is set to be legalized in the Great White North by Canada Day 2018, so that's the 1st of July. This is just another reason for Canadians to party. It'll be a whole different kind of chilled party this year, I think. The Liberal government vowed to make it happen in 2015, and it will finally come into effect in 2018. Each province will set their taxes and legal consumption ages accordingly. Finally, at number 1, a step in the right direction for equality in one of the least tolerant corners of the earth. Women will be able to drive in Saudi Arabia from 2018. Women have traditionally been considered as inferior to males in Saudi Arabia, and they don't have the same rights. Up until this year just gone, women have not been allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia. Now to me, this is ridiculous. I'm a female that's grown up in the West with little to no restrictions holding me back in what I'm doing and what I want. Finally though, times are changing. Women will be allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia as of the 24th of June 2018. I for one really hope that this paves the way for more of a focus on equality, especially in the Middle East.